Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to my podcast, Life Treasures and Golden Moments, where I share with you true stories of miracles and stories of inspiration. This is Natalie Silva. Today, I would like to share 3 stories with you from the book When God Makes Lemonade, created by Don Jacobson. The stories that I'm going to share with you today are from everyday people, and they were surprised by unexpected sweetness that happened in their life in the midst of life circumstances. You know, stuff happens in life, but blessings come along every day to give you strength to hold on and to see things through and making a difference. And this is what these stories are about today. I hope you enjoy them. The first story is titled Grandma's Love by Kathleen Kohler. We have something we need to tell you, I said. My boyfriend Lauren and I were sitting across my parents at the dinner table. It was early March, and when Lauren had already graduated from high school, I still had my senior year ahead. I reached under the table and squeezed Lauren's hand to gain courage. The knot in my stomach grew tighter, and I took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. Daddy's smile vanished instantly, and his face began steaming bright red. His lips stretched into a thin, fat line of anger. My mother sat next to him, stunned, unblinking, holding an artichoke leaf between bites. And I choked out the rest. We want to get married in April. It wasn't the best timing for my confession. My older brother had left home the previous summer, and now, without warning, my parents were going to be empty nesters and grandparents. That didn't set well. Over the next few weeks, the house grew quiet, and I could feel my shame hanging in the air like a dark haze. Mom and Daddy tried to cope with the shock, and they decided it might be easier if they told Grandma the news. I was grateful for their decision. Grandma and I were close, and I knew the situation would cause her anguish. I wanted to delay the inevitable look of shame as long as possible. A few weeks later, on Easter, Daddy drove across town to pick up Grandma for dinner at our house. I hadn't seen her since my parents talked to her, and I knew the moment was coming when I would have to look her in her beautiful blue eyes and see the same look of disappointment I had seen in my parents. As I waited for Dad and Grandma to arrive, I retreated to my room, anxious with energy. I nervously bounced around the room of my childhood, cleaning and packing. I dusted off some old kids' books, organized my clothes that would soon no longer fit, and began wondering about the future. Lauren and I had dated for more than a year. He was my first boyfriend and the only boy I'd ever known unkissed. But was the love we felt enough to last a lifetime? I was both excited and scared to find out. Just after 1 o'clock, I heard Daddy's car roar up the driveway, and minutes later I could hear faint voices. The aroma of fresh-baked ham filled the house and flooded my room, carrying with it hints of the conversation coming from the kitchen. What does Grandma think of me now? I wondered. Will I still be her special girl? I grew up going to Grandma's little white house on State Street as far back as I could remember. During the school year, I stayed overnight at her house on the weekends. But when June came and school let out, I got to stay for a week straight. Together we picked flowers in the garden, blossoming around her house. Because Grandma didn't drive, we walked everywhere, to the post office in downtown, to Safeway. Sometimes she treated me to a root beer soda at the corner drugstore. Often we combed the old Woolworths, looking for treasures to use in her endless craft projects. On warm, sunny days, We strolled down to the Lake Washington, each carrying a loaf of bread to feed the ducks. Grandma taught me to keep still and hold each slice out for their hungry eyes to see. "Don't be afraid," she said. "They won't hurt you." The brave ones nipped our fingers as they grabbed the bread from our hands, but it didn't hurt, just like Grandma said. At night we ate ice cream and watched movies. On the 4th of July, we squeezed together on the small back porch and watched the fireworks from her peekaboo view of the lake. When rain splattered the streets, we snuggled inside at Grandma's, and she showed me how to make yarn dolls. I crafted the bodies and added their faces while she crocheted their clothes. Now caught in a stranger place between childhood and adulthood, I needed reassurance that I would be okay. I couldn't afford to lose my best friend. A gentle knock came on my door, making me jump, and my heart raced with fear. "Come in," I said, ashamed. I kept my head down and stared at the floor when Grandma entered my room. She walked right over to where I stood and wrapped me in her arms. I leaned back and searched her face. I saw no embarrassment, no disappointment, and no display of angry condemnation. Only love shined from her powder blue eyes. "Nothing you could ever do will change my love for you," she said. She pulled me close, and I laid my head against her shoulder, burying my face in her pink sweater. Silent tears spilled down my cheeks and dampened her simple cotton dress. We clung to each other for a long time. In that tender moment, I knew that no matter where I went or what happened in my life, my grandma loved me. My anxious thoughts subsided, and I felt strong enough to confront whatever my future held. Her hug had said, "You are not a loser," and most importantly, it revealed to me that I was loved based not on what I did, but on who I was. 2 weeks later, Grandma helped prepare the flowers for our wedding. Lauren and I recited our marriage vows in a small ceremony surrounded by family in the church she had grown up in. We found a huge second-floor apartment near Lake Washington, just 3 blocks from Grandma. On an early morning in late September, Benjamin arrived, bringing more love into our lives. Oh, and that boy I married? Well, last April, we celebrated 33 years of our lifelong commitment to each other. We weren't expected to make it, but the love we share today is deeper than the day we said I do. Love really does make all the difference. Now, in this book, they have a little spot that says lemon drops. And it says, "Kathleen's grandma sounds a lot like God to me. She loved unconditionally, spoke words of life, and lifted the weight of her granddaughter's shame from her shoulders. God who says, 'Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy with laden,' takes us as we are. We only have to respond to his reaching embrace." Beautiful story. Thank you, Miss Kathleen. That was really great. 33 years. Wow. So nice. This next story is titled "Swept Away," and the author is Erica Hoffman. I squeezed the dirty water from the sponge and wiped the sweat from my brow. The stove was only half clean, and the annual scrubbing for the upcoming rental season was wearing me out. "Let's go for a short swim," I called to my husband in the other room. It was late afternoon, and I could see from our beach house window that the shore was nearly abandoned. I pulled off my sticky work clothes and slid into my black swimsuit and skirt accessory. Call me old-fashioned or just old, but I'm of the age where I prefer buying bathing suits with skirts. I never go swimming without one. Reluctantly, my husband trapezed after me toward the water. He and I had been short with each other earlier, and I could tell he wasn't particularly excited to be getting wet. When I sauntered into the water, he stood only calf deep. "Come on, it's not cold if you immerse yourself," I urged, rolling my eyes at his hesitancy. "Cold water won't kill you." I paddled about in the gentle waves, and my husband finally swam out to meet me. We were floating about 10 feet from the shore when a large wave came over us and pulled us both out. I realized I was over my head and asked my husband if he could touch bottom. "No," he shook his head, spitting seawater from his mouth. I started the breaststroke toward shore, but made no headway. I tried an Australian crawl, fighting against the current, but the undertow pulled me farther out. I exerted, I strained, I went nowhere. "Hold on to me," I yelled. My husband reached for my fingers, but the waves pushed us apart. "Swim in the next wave," he answered. We both tried. Like being in vortex, we were pinned down in a current of water that tugged us backward. The beach was 30 feet from us, but it might as well have been miles. We were losing the battle. I was weak. I couldn't stay up. I couldn't even float. "I can't make it," I said. "Help!" yelled my husband with anxiousness in his eyes. He began waving his arms, crossing them. "Help!" he cried out, scanning the shore. No one was in sight. We bobbed helplessly with our heads barely above water. In the pit of my stomach, I knew it was over. I thought of our kids, and I thought of the headlines. I thought how we die here, a stone's throw from shore. "I can't go on, I can't," I murmured. He looked worried and was still an arm's length from me. He grabbed for my fingertips, but he couldn't hold them. With the last touch of our hands that had touched for 40 years, I knew we were goners. A swell pushed him in a little. His toe had hit the sand. He turned sideways, reached back and grabbed my skirt. The wave relentlessly rugged and dragged me out. But he clutched the scrap of fabric and struggled forward. "I'm too tired," he said. "Don't let go," I begged him. He thrust on, fighting the waves as they tried to pull us apart forever. The skirt, stretchy material, tightened. The waistband surged away from me. He yanked me forward, and my toes scraped land. Too weak to stand, I crawled uphill, clawing the sand and collapsed. My husband lay next to me, waves smacking over his exhausted body. "Where's help?" I thought. I couldn't lift my head. I couldn't turn. My head was pounding. I lay inert, limp, and dead as a fish. "Byron," I called for my husband, but there was no answer. I dozed off. I woke to a noisy machine and lifted my head to spy a dune buggy with a lifeguard bolting up the coast. He was high up on the beach, near the houses, and he passed without ever looking over at the ocean. "You okay?" I yelled into the wind. My husband wasn't as high on the incline as I. He was still partially submerged. "My heart is racing," he said. "Someone will come." I have no concept of the time that passed. We were like castaways portrayed in movies, innervated from fighting the reckless sea. Stillness enveloped me. I heard a dog bark. "Can you move?" I asked. "Let me stay here a while." We lay still. My mind still couldn't grasp we hadn't died. Nothing was different about the sea that day. Nothing gave us pause. There were no red flags to warn that our little dip would turn into an epic struggle for survival. But we had survived somehow. After a while, we headed to the wooded bench on the public stairway overlooking the sea, where we had deposited our towels and flip-flops a lifetime ago. A couple there studied us and asked how we were. "We almost drowned," I said. The guy smiled and then realized we were sincere. "I saw you lying at the water's edge. I wondered, I didn't know," he said. "The wind kept people from hearing us," I said, "but my husband saved my life." Tranquility has settled over me since our brush with death. I learned that I am on borrowed time. I learned how uncertain the future is. I rediscovered how deeply I love my husband. When a cross word forms on my lips directed at my spouse, I take out that black swimming skirt, stretched out and frayed, and remember how I was doomed and reborn. I thank my husband again and again for not letting go. Accidents happen, and by God's grace we survived. We have found a new hope for the future, resilience we didn't know we had, and most important, love. We emerge kinder, gentler, and better. We smile more, enjoy life more, and accept every day for what it really is, because it really is a gift. What a story. Wow. Oh, that would have been scary. And this is the lemon drop. Sometimes we have to nearly lose someone to know how much we really love that person. Why is that? Maybe our love grows cold and distant with time and distractions. But as Erica's story shows, it's never too late for a second chance. Her story has inspired me to imagine my life without my loved ones. And when I do, it sweeps me back into their arms with gratitude and joy. Wow. So guys, remember that. Love your loved ones as much as you can and hang on to them. The last story of today that I'm taking from When God Makes Lemonade is called A Divine Hair Appointment, and the author is Amy von Borstel. They gave me 30 days' notice. Today at my job, my husband told me. His shoulders slouched forward and despondent. He had that look in his eyes. It was the fourth time in 22 years that my husband had lost a job, and it wasn't getting any easier. It hurt every time, and I felt as if my heart was sinking into my stomach, fluttering for life as fear grabbed hold of my soul and tempted me to give up hope. The economy was bad, and I knew it. Everyone was talking about it, but it didn't feel sufficient to blame the job market. I wasn't blaming God either, but I was questioning whether or not He had our lives in His hands. Why, Lord? How can this be? Where did we go wrong? Memories of bare cupboards played in my mind, realizing we had no savings made matters worse. Looking for another job? We can't do this alone. My husband and I prayed, please God, be with us. As my husband's last 30 days at work slowly passed by, he looked at our finances in the coming months. It's going to be tight, Michael said, with a slightly anxious tone in his voice. It always is. I tried to comfort him. But we always make it, I know, he said, sitting back in his chair, letting out a deep sigh. I just don't want to work only to pay the mortgage anymore. You know. I nodded because I did know. We had talked several times while dating, and after being married about following our dreams, Michael wanted to work in the medical field so we could use his training doing international missions. I too had dreams to work abroad with orphans in Africa. Maybe this is the time to take it more seriously, I told him. Michael, let's pray and ask God to lead us in the right direction, and I'll look for work. I began searching on the internet for job openings, wondering where or if I'd find a job before we spent my husband's last paycheck. An ad for catering business caught my eye. The hours would fit in perfectly with my schedule as a homeschooling mom. The catering business would offer flexibility and allow me to choose the events I would be able to work. I sent in my resume and was called back for an interview the following week. I was thrilled, and so my husband was also thrilled. But my excitement quickly turned to feelings of uneasiness. It had been almost 10 years since I needed to dress up for work. I looked through my wardrobe and then glanced in the mirror. My hair, I sighed. I tried to remember the last time I had been in a salon, but quickly gave up. It would be more to get a few highlights in a trim, I told myself, trying not to think of our budget for a moment. I need to look professional, trying to think of a cost-saving solution. I leafed through my address book looking for an old friend's number. She cut hair in her house as a fraction of one costs in a salon. But she didn't answer or call me back for several days. Time was running out. The interview was only in 4 days, so I needed a friend's advice and called a hairdresser she had raved about. It was right at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening, and I didn't expect anyone to pick up, let alone set up an appointment. But a sweet lady named Tanya answered. She listened to my situation and booked me as her first appointment on Tuesday morning. "Thank you so much, Tanya. This is such a blessing." "Of course, honey," she replied. "See you Tuesday." I sensed a warm spirit of relief wash through me as I hung up the phone. Even knowing I'd have to borrow money from our grocery budget to pay for the appointment, I felt it would be worth every penny. When I arrived at the salon Tuesday morning, I was nervous, but Tanya greeted me with such a kind smile. "This way, come on, let's get started," she said, inviting me to sit down in her chair. She wrapped the cape around me and gently put her hands on my shoulders. "Now, I want you to tell me," she said, looking at me in the mirror. "If money were not an issue, what would you want to have done to your hair?" I sat back in shock, my mouth caught open and my eyebrows curled over my eyes. "I don't know," I mumbled. "I guess I haven't really thought about it." But the truth was, I had thought about it. I had stood in front of the mirror the night before, imagining my hair dressed up like a movie star, highlights, color, cut, styled. "Well," Tanya smiled, "I've been praying about you since we talked on Saturday, and I want to do your hair at no charge." I can only imagine the look of shock on my face as I briefly looked away from her gaze. "Is she serious?" I asked myself. There is no way. I looked back to her, and the joy in her face was undeniable. "Anything you want," she added. "Color, highlights, a haircut. I can even do your eyebrows." My face fell into my hands, and I began crying and weeping. I couldn't contain myself. I was shocked. Why would a stranger bless me in such a huge way? How could she know exactly what I wanted? "Yes," I said, with tears running down my face. "A total makeover." Tanya began moving her fingers through my hair, talking about color options and different styles. She ran warm water through my hair and washed it with wonderful scented shampoo. She combed, clipped, and cut while talking about her mission trip to Africa and the work she had done with the orphans in other developing countries. She told me a story after story, quoted some of my favorite scriptures from the Psalms, and then suddenly stopped and asked me, "What is in your heart's desire?" I couldn't answer. I was still crying too hard. How could a hair appointment feel so sacred. How did Tanya know exactly what to say? Why was I feeling so encouraged? It's just a haircut, I kept trying to tell myself. But it wasn't true. It was much more. I had never experienced anything so surreal, or life-giving, or unexpected. Joy grabbed hold of my heart and pulled it back into the light, into hope. I felt peace as if each touch of Tanya's fingers were restoring my soul. Amy, she told me, somewhere in the third hour of my makeover, God has given you his heart for Africa. I cried and cried and cried, and Tanya just kept smiling. I can sense it in you. How could a hairdresser know so much about me? I wondered. Then it hit me. Tanya just wasn't just a hairdresser. She was a blessing, moved by God to serve me with her talent and her time, but mostly with her spirit. It was a supernatural encounter, the kind you never believe can happen until it happens to you. By the time I left the salon, my hair had never looked so good. I had never stood quite as tall, as my soul had never been so refreshed. I walked into my interview that week, feeling confident in the love of God, and received the job on the spot. A few months later, my husband found a good program and was accepted and began studying for his dream career. He graduated 2.5 years later and was hired quickly by a wonderful company that specializes in medical diagnostics. The sponsor, a medical train in South Africa that gives medical care to people in villages with limited resources. His company also assists employers and employees with adoption fees. It's no coincidence that Michael's company does medical missions in Africa and helps to support orphans through adoptions. And it wasn't a coincidence all those years ago that led me to Tanya's salon. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. There are only divine appointments sent by God to reveal his extravagant love in amazing ways. My husband's job is just one example. Another is a son we are helping to adopt from Africa. And so is my cherished friend, Tanya, who came into my life as an unexpected gift at the exact right time and remains one of my dearest friends. Wow, that was neat. And the lemon drop? 2 things needed to be in place for this divine moment to happen. Amy needed to be ready to receive, and Tanya needed to be ready to give. Sometimes we are in need of encouragement, and other times we are blessed to be able to encourage others. No matter where you are right now, I hope you're looking for the divine and every day. It's where it most often shows up. Thank you very much for that beautiful story. And I hope it encourages you all and gives you food for thought. So now, my dear friends, I would like to share some kind of silly stories with you that kind of make everybody a little happier. And sometimes life can be hard and we need to laugh every now and then. So I have this other book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. Laughter is the best medicine. And Amy Newmark was the one that put it together. And I've chosen 3 different stories to make you laugh today. I hope you can find some humor in it. The first one is called Wedding Night Blues by Sue Ellen Sanders. I think you'll really like this. It's really cute. Someone wrote this quote, "Be all in or get out. There's no halfway." And the author is unknown. Anyhow, here's the beginning of the story, The Wedding Night Blues. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. On my wedding night, as the drenching rain soaked my ecru lace wedding gown and my carefully coiffed hair wilted in the storm. I ran through the backyards of my neighbors crying, "Honey, honey, come back." I could feel them staring behind their curtains and wondering how what was supposed to be the best night of my life had turned out so badly. I imagined how my carefully applied makeup was probably giving me raccoon eyes and wondered if the grass stains would come out of the bottom of my once lovely gown. "Honey!" I was almost screaming now, "Honey, please come back, please." I could feel their pitying eyes as my pleas began more deeper and desperate, and the rain pounded down on my back. It was just after midnight on our wedding day. The minister had declared us husband and wife much earlier that evening inside the small Baptist church where my betrothed had once attended Sunday school. We made it through the vows, and when my new husband gazed at me, there were tears in his eyes. Tears of joy, I assumed. There was a brief moment of concern when we were lighting the unity candle, and I caught my veil on fire. Both quick action by my betrothed smothered it out. The typical Florida summer rain has started its drizzle before we even left the church. "It's good luck when it rains on your wedding day," everyone told me as we tried to dodge the rain and headed to the hotel where the reception would begin. It was a glorious gathering of our closest friends and relatives with an open bar. We made the rounds of the tables, danced to the deepest, wonderful D-Day tunes which we had selected together, and then laughed and cried as we got ready to leave. My bridesmaid had loaded my car with boxed gifts and cards, and we planned to drop them by my house, not our house, before we went to the hotel where we would be spending our wedding night. Our flight out to San Francisco wasn't until the next afternoon, and a honeymoon in the wine country awaited us. I looked forward to sleeping in through the morning. The house was only 5 minutes away from the lovely turn-of-the-century hotel where we hosted the reception, so we figured we'd leave the gifts there and go home to take out my dog. That would hold the little Australian Shepherd until the next morning when my friends would be coming by to take her out to their house. I unlocked the front door and held it open as my husband carried in a stack of boxes wrapped in glittery white and silver paper. As I stood in the doorway, my honey-colored shepherd dashed past into the rain. By the time we put the gifts on the dining room table and ran after her, Honey was gone, nowhere to be found, and that's why my husband and I spent the first hour after our wedding reception, tired, wet, and more than slightly drunk, running around the neighborhood, calling desperately for the dog named Honey. Finally, we cornered her, filthy and wet and smelling, well, like a wet dog, and brought her back into the house. We wiped her down with a towel as best we could, and then went out on to our hotel. We flew off to our honeymoon the next day. But from that time that we began our married life in that little Lake Worth neighborhood where I owned my first house, until we moved together, along with a dog, an hour north to Port Lucie, I imagined I could feel the pitying eyes of the neighbors, who were probably still imagining that I was chasing my new husband that rainy wedding night, calling, "Honey, honey, come back, honey." Oh dear, that is so funny. And thank you, Sue Ellen Sanders, for that lovely, funny story. Yep, that's so wonderful. So let's see what the next one is. I hope you enjoyed that one. That was kind of a chuckle. The next funny story is called The Naked Truth, and the author is Kathy Dixon. And here's a little quote for you. I learned that there's a certain character that can be built from embarrassing yourself endlessly. Here we go. I was so excited to vacation in Florida for the first time. Thanks to my sister, she had invited my daughters and me to go with her family, and she even lent me her brand new, very expensive bathing suit. It was made of soft, natural fibers and was so comfortable. The first morning we were there, I donned the bathing suit and we headed to the crowded beach. We hit the water running, taking in the sights and sounds of the ocean, the waves, the breeze, the fish that nibbled at our toes, the white sand, squawking seagulls, flying pelicans, seashells, and whatever else captured our attention. I was mesmerized by it all while I bobbed in the cool ocean water. Suddenly, a deep pain pierced my right arm, stiffening it instantly. My sister saw my face and rushed to my side. I lifted my arm to find huge blisters that circled the entire length of my arm like that of a coiled snake. I had been stung by jellyfish. Ooh, that hurts too if you ever had it bit by a jellyfish. My sister was a diver and trained EMT, so she quickly led me out of the water to head back to our room. She wanted to put a special ointment on the blisters, gave me Benadryl to counteract any ill effects from the sting, and kept me under her watchful eye in hopes I wouldn't have to be rushed to the hospital. I didn't want to alarm anyone, so I emerged from the waters quickly, with my arm now hanging completely still at my side. We had forgotten our towels that morning in our eagerness to get to the ocean, so I shivered as I walked in silence. I began to notice people staring at me and pointing me out. It seemed as if the entire beach was fixed on me. Then I looked down and saw why. I was naked. The beautiful, expensive bathing suit was completely transparent now that it was wet. Not only was I shining in all my glory on a crowded beach, I also had no towel for the long trek back to the room. Then to add more salt to the wound, I had to walk just past all the people at the swimming pool. Like everyone else, they could not believe their eyes and stared at this either very brave or extremely stupid woman who paraded naked past them all. All I could do was keep my head down and hope I didn't hear any catcalls. I have a great vision here and could see that their shocked faces and gaping mouths. I could only imagine the pool attendant cussing me for having to clean up all the mess from the dropped beverage cups. Finally, we made it up to the 12th floor, where my sister lovingly gave me the antihistamine and rubbed salve on my blisters. When she saw I was going to be okay, she began laughing uncontrollably. Who in their right mind could refrain from laughing at such an obvious opportunity? I've heard of pranks, but this was the mother of them all. I accused her of doing it deliberately. She swore up and down that she had never worn the suit and didn't know it would totally vanish when wet. Oh, well, good had come from my situation. The good news was I didn't have to go to the hospital. I learned that the suit I wore was for lying out in the sun, not for swimming. Believe me, the difference was transparent. I also saved my sister from crippling embarrassment had she worn it. Plus, the cell phones at that time did not have the capacity to take pictures, so at least I wasn't plastered all over social media. My incident did, however, become a classic family event and laugh about again and again. The bad news was that I had to walk past all those people again later that day to get back to the beach. I'm sure those beach lovers will never forget that day I gave their kids a quick education on human anatomy. Oh my goodness, that is so funny. And I have to relate, when I was a young gal, my mom had bought a white suit like that. And we went to the beach, and it was brand new. She'd never worn it before. And we got into the ocean, and the same thing happened to her. She was so mortified, but she did have a towel, so we didn't have to walk through a big crowd. But that does happen. So if you buy white swimsuits, be sure you check them out before you go into public and get them all wet. You never know. That was a funny story. Okay, so let's see. The last one I've got today is called, bear with me just a minute, No Good Deed by Linda Bittle. Let me find that one. Oh dear, okay. Here we go. And here's another little saying here. Great deeds are usually wrought at great risk. So, I didn't really know Darlene, but my friend, her daughter, wanted me to meet her, so she thought we would like each other. That's how I came to knock on her door at the edge of town one spring afternoon. She looked a little harried as she answered the door. Would you help me do something before we sit down? She asked. I need to return a chicken to the neighbor. I thought that made good first impressions and agreed to go with her. The chicken in question was still fuzzy with down feathers underneath the sparsely feathered wings. It was also wet with dog slobber from her Great Pyrenees. Darlene had rescued the little bird from the mouth of their gigantic dog, who had noticed the intruders slip under the fence between the two backyards. She kept the chick in her hands and locked the dog inside the yard, and we walked down the corner and around the block. Unlike many western Washington spring days, the sun was shining and the birds were singing in the tall Douglas firs. How nice, I thought. We'll do a good deed together and then go by her hot pond and get to know one another over a nice glass of iced tea. The neighbor lived in a nice trailer set back off the road and accessed by a longish driveway. I don't think Darlene noticed the steel gray pit bull that came out of the doghouse by the mailbox. Oh dear. The dog stood silently as we walked by, and I nodded to him as we passed and got a slight wag of the tail in reply. Apparently, two gray-haired women, one carrying a resident chicken, didn't require so much as a warning bark. The dog only watched us walk up the steps to the door and then lay down in the shade to keep us under surveillance in case he misjudged our intentions. Darlene knocked and then waited patiently while the neighbor, an old Korean man, looked us over from a front-facing window. When he opened the door, Darlene gave him her biggest smile and held the chicken up to him. I'm returning your chicken, she said. The man did not reply. He didn't even smile. Thinking that he didn't understand, she gave further explanation. It got into my backyard, and I'm sorry that my dog got to it first, but I think it'll be all right. It's just a little wet. At first, the man didn't respond. Then he took a step backward and put both hands into his front pockets. And I realized long before Darlene did that, he was not going to take the chicken. It's your chicken, she said. She smiled again and pushed it toward him, and he sighed. Son buy chicken this year, no good chickens. He shook his head sadly. Then he perked up, and an idea occurred to him, and he did smile, just a little. You want another chicken? What? I could see that it was starting to dawn on Darlene that the good deed was not going to go as planned. Still hopeful and holding the chick out to him, she tried one more time. No, 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 no. This is your chicken that got into my yard, and I want to return it to you. It's your chicken. I admired her persistence and her innocent belief that doing the right thing was the right thing to do, no matter how difficult it might be. And really, returning a neighbor's property should be the easiest thing in the world. Or not. The gentleman pulled the door closed behind him as he stepped off the porch. I noticed that his hands returned to his pockets, as if he were afraid that Darlene would force him to take the chick. Follow me, he said. We did. I thought I saw the pit bull smile. Anyhow, we followed him around the house to the pen where the rest of his no-good chickens had lived. Which one do you want? He asked as he stepped over the short fence. Darlene and I looked at each other. She shrugged. You choose, I said to the man, and he did. The chick he handed me was identical to the one that Darlene still held, except it wasn't sticky from dog drool. We thanked him and headed back toward the street. The pit bull thumped his tail on the ground as a goodbye. He didn't seem to care that 2 of the resident chickens were being carried off by a pair of gray-haired women. I couldn't help myself. I started to laugh. By the time we got back to the house, she already had pulled her cell phone from her pocket and called my friend to request that she stop and get chicken feed on the way home. Listening to her side of that conversation had me nearly in tears as she explained how we had attempted to return 1 chicken to its rightful owner, but came home with 2 instead. After the chicks had been safely installed in a large dog crate with water and bedding, we sat by her fish pond to enjoy a bottle of wine. I asked my new best friend if she had any neighbors who owned ponies. I'd always wanted a pony, and if one slipped into her backyard, I'd be delighted to come by and help her return it. Oh my goodness, the things we get ourselves into. Well, anyhow, that was from Chicken Soup from the Soul. Laughter is the best medicine. I hope it gave you a couple of laughs today, which we all need right now. And I hope you all have a great weekend and a good week next week coming up. And it's so good to be here with you all. So until next time, take care and may God bless. This is Natalie Silva with Life Treasures and Golden Moments.